Hello, my friends. It's your host, Phil Larson, and this is your motivational high five on legacy. Let's do this. Welcome back to a new episode. I'd like to give a shout out to Jennifer Trevino, who is my newest patron at my Patreon, which you can get to at patreon.com/YMH5, the number 5. Again, that's patreon.com/YMH5. And at a couple different levels, you can support the podcast, and there's different rewards and benefits to doing that. So thank you, Jennifer. Or you can go to phillarson.net/support and discover all the different ways you can support this podcast. And as always, thank you. I want to get right into it. I want to talk about legacy today. Legacy first is defined as something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor or from the past. And that's the thing about legacies is they're hard to keep in mind because we don't usually think about them unless someone has passed away that we were close to or that we knew well. And maybe we inherit something or are thinking about their life, the life that they led, or maybe they left a legacy of love, and if that's the case, that might be something we bring up at the funeral or memorial service because it impacted us in some positive way that we want to share with others, or we received some wonderful benefits by the way that they lived, or maybe they left a legacy of giving that has defined and been adopted as a core value by the surviving family. You could also leave a legacy of hate or impatience or a victim mindset or other negative things that maybe might not be brought up at a funeral. You see, legacy can be a mixed bag. It can be a mix of positive and negative things. And really, if someone is truly probably an average human, it will include some of that. So a legacy could trigger some really hard emotions that you kind of maybe have to work through. And when I think about the different kinds of legacies, most likely the negative legacies, or if a person kind of left a bad taste in your mouth, they probably weren't really tuned in so much as to what they were building in the moment to leave behind. Because that's really important to do. And it's sad that we may not be reminded of legacy often because the life we are living right now is what's building the legacy that we leave. So tuning in as much as we can to this reality that we are building what we leave behind is and becomes a gift. It might even be part of a legacy that you are a person who is tuned in to what you are building to leave behind. It is a gift to those we leave legacies for. We leave our legacies to. We pass down to those people. It is a gift to keep that in mind right now because they in turn inherit what we are building. In fact, one of the major motivators for me to start this podcast was from a grandparent dying. And after they had passed, and really they lived an extraordinary life, who left a legacy of love, among other things. But had there been a medium where they had recorded all of their thoughts down over the years as they were in young adulthood to middle age to raising kids and their business and the things that they've learned along the way, had they left that behind, I would have just eaten it up, especially in that moment following their passing. I came to realize that I had a lot to learn from them, and now a lot of that is gone. The accessibility to that wisdom, to that person, is gone. The things we leave behind are our legacies, but our legacies are being built right now. Or as Gary Vaynerchuk says, please think about your legacy because you're writing it every day. And the final thing I want to say about legacies, and maybe the most important, is that legacies get us out of our self-centered thinking to consider those who deserve our consideration. An easy example is creating a will, which I haven't done. You know why? Because I haven't really come to grips with my immortality, which basically means I don't want to die, which is incredibly self-centered. And it gets me stuck in my own head. If I were to put together a will, it gets me out and it gets me considering those who are closest to me, who are worth my consideration. Legacies force us to think bigger than ourselves. Not only the things that we pass down, like our values and maybe some monetary things, but also the vehicles in which we pass them down, like a podcast or in the form of writing songs about your loved ones. Tuning into our legacy and letting that become a daily habit or something of high value to you to be mindful of forces us outside of our heads and considering others, which is that ever a bad thing? I would say no. And I'm not speaking this because I have it all together, and I don't. I don't at all. I'm speaking this because I'm learning this in my life right now. And in fact, that's what this podcast has been about as well. That is part of the legacy I want to leave, is not that I have it all together, but I'm learning, and this is what I'm learning, and I want others to learn with me, or I want to learn from others as well. Today is my birthday, and birthdays help you think about legacies a little bit better. At least it does to me. And we were with some friends last night who are friends, but also like mentors to us as well. They are people we want to learn from. They are people who are leaving legacies in their own life. And one of the high values they place just in their being is words of encouragement. And this is something that they do at all of their birthday parties that they put together, for their family or anything that we're invited to for a birthday party for someone within their family or a friend, mutual friend, is they go around the table and they say what inspires them about the person whose birthday it is, or what they have learned from them, or what, some of the great things they see in those people. And their words, the words that they're leaving are words they leave behind in the hearts of others, and that is a legacy. And so they did that for me, this couple and my wife. And at first, I kind of batted it down, and I was like, well, or tried to explain it away, or didn't really accept it. And they're like, no, you accept it, please, because it's true. And this is where I'm learning. This is where I'm also struggling with this. They're telling me how they see I'm leaving a legacy, and I have a hard time accepting it. And it looks like, or at least maybe to me, that it might look like humility, or thanks, but, and try to explain it away. But really what it comes down to is my self-centeredness, and maybe some low self-worth and stuff in there as well. But it makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I'm not incredibly used to hearing those things all the time. And the comfort for me is to not just sit and listen and accept these positive things. But in reality, I am grateful. And when I can accept those things, I ingest better the legacies that are being left behind for me. And I am encouraged to continue forward with the way that I am living my life and the kind of legacy I'm leaving. So finally, when I kind of stopped and listened and took it in, I was able to accept it. And we get so preoccupied and so busy that we don't think of others. We only think of ourselves, and legacy gets thrown out until it's too late. Until it's too late. Don't let it be too late. Friends, at the end of every episode, as you know, we invite a new positive narrative in our life. We embrace the power of neuroplasticity, that we can combat the negative narratives, the negative stories that have been told to us. Basically, the bad legacies, saying you're not good enough, or even the models of legacy of victimhood and low self-worth and never measuring up to unrealistic expectations. And so we combat those by finding a reflection of ourselves in the mirror. And we embrace the power of neuroplasticity, which is backed by science, that we can rewire our brain by introducing positive, oftentimes new narratives, but positive and even true about ourselves. Or we continue to say them until they become true, expecting a different reality until it becomes reality. It's so amazing how that happens, and the power is within ourselves to do that. And there's nothing magical or mystical about this, though you can be caught up in the beauty of creation and the power that we have for this to work. But there's science backed in research and experiments and brain scans about how your brain lights up. I have 2 episodes with a scientist friend on episode 15, parts 1 and 2, that really dive deep into this, but it's exciting and it's something to embrace. And so we embrace it every episode. We do that by finding a reflection of ourselves in the mirror and embracing a new positive narrative. And today, when you have time, look at yourself. Allow yourself to tune in to the kind of life you are building now, and maybe the difference in what you're building into what you want to leave behind. And there's where we can pivot and correct and say this to yourself: I can tune in to the legacy I want to leave and let it direct the legacy I'm building today. And one of the questions you might want to ask yourself is, how can I build a legacy in which utilizes my gifts and interests? For me, I like working with audio, so a podcast made sense. I also write music for a living. I release primarily instrumental music. And every year around my son's birthday, I release a new album. So my son is turning 4 on March 12th, and on Friday, March 11th, which is when music gets released on Fridays, I'm releasing Fatherhood Year 4. This is my 4th album dedicated to my son, which the last year has been incredible because he's really grown to love my music, which is incredibly humbling and beautiful. And I have to get out of my own head and say, my son can have his own interests and he can love my music. And at some point he might not like my music or go in and out, but it's a way in which I am honoring him in his life. And because a lot of my music is instrumental, though there is one that I am doing some vocal elements on this album, the titles to these tracks are incredibly meaningful to me and to our story. And one day I'll be able to explain some of those titles to him, as my wife has pointed out, and share in the legacy of our story that intertwines with each other and now interacts with an audio element, which is super beautiful. So, of course, maybe a little self-promotion. That a way you can support this podcast is by just streaming my music on any streaming service, and that I'm launching a new album, Fatherhood Year 4, but I'm proud of it. I'm proud of this album and these tracks that are so meaningful to me and are gaining meaning for my son, and watching how that legacy interacts with one of the people I love the most in my life and I'm so grateful for is truly life-changing. So in what ways can the legacy that you are building interact with your own interests and talents and abilities? That is part of the legacy you leave behind. Like, of course they would leave a legacy like this. If you journal a lot, you have a separate journal, maybe that you are journaling for your kids to one day read or something. That of course they would leave a legacy like this because that's the kind of person they were. But friends, as you know, the decisions that will ultimately define your life, you have to begin to make today. It starts with you.